This is the Beyond Belief Sobriety Podcast, where we explore topics of interest to people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. Well, hello, and thank you for clicking the link or pressing the button or whatever it was that you had to do to download this episode. I'm honored that you would spend your valuable time to listen to this podcast. Today's episode is all about computer gaming addiction, and you will also learn a little history of the fellowship Computer Gaming Addicts Anonymous. But before we get into that, I would like to announce a new sponsor for the podcast. It's a company called SoberLink. They've designed an advanced alcohol monitoring system that's used in treatment centers and sober living facilities, or simply by people who want or need some additional accountability as they begin their recovery journey. So at the beginning of each episode from here on out, you will hear me talk about SoberLink, and it will go something like this. If you're seeking a tangible way to maintain accountability and prove sobriety to loved ones, you have to try SoberLink. If you haven't heard of SoberLink, they've created a remote alcohol monitoring system that revolutionizes the way people document sobriety. The system includes a breathalyzer and uses artificial intelligence to display your test results in a calendar format, helping you analyze your habits and prove to yourself and others that you are, in fact, not drinking. It even has real-time results, facial recognition, and tamper detection, so no one will question the validity of your results. SoberLink and I have created a guide called 5 Tools and Strategies for Those on a Secular Path to Recovery that you can find at soberlink.com/BBS. If you're ready to take the next step in your recovery journey, mention the Beyond Belief Sobriety Podcast when ordering SoberLink, and you'll receive $50 off their device. And now for episode 248, Computer Gaming Addiction with Scott J. I have a guest today. His name is Scott J, and he is here to talk about computer gaming addiction. He is a member of Computer Gaming. I'll let him Computer Gamers Anonymous. I'll let you tell us, Scott, what is the name of the organization?
Yeah, hi, John. Thanks. Yeah, the name of it is Computer Gaming Addicts Anonymous. And it's a fellowship for people struggling with any type of gaming, whether it's on computer, video console, or mobile gaming.
And you wrote me and you mentioned that you've been involved in this for I think about 9 years or so, and that you found that it was almost secular in nature from the beginning. So they've never really had this issue like you might have in AA, where you have people who have a need for secular meetings. So is that what you have found?
Yeah, and part of that was me bringing my own experience from AA, because just leading up to those years, I'd still been active in AA, even though I had been spinning out of control with gaming addiction, and had run into some serious trouble trying to sponsor people who were not monotheistic and were having trouble with AA's religious language. So when the small group that started Computer Gaming Addicts Anonymous was coming together, easily half of us were not monotheistic, and probably half of us didn't have experience with other 12-step fellowships. So in a lot of ways, we were, starting fresh. Also, up to that point, before we really formalized things, we had a lot of trouble from being very loose with the 12 traditions that are usually used in fellowship. So that was also part of the picture there, that we were firmly committed to following the 12 traditions because of the troubles that we had had up to that point. And following the 12 traditions included not promoting any kind of religious beliefs.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it sure does. So can we start, if you don't mind, could you share your story of computer gaming and how it became a problem and how you got into recovery?
Yeah, sure. So I first found recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous because my first drug of choice was alcohol. I drank a lot as a teenager and in college, and it spun out of control to the point where I started looking for help around age 22. And I got into AA, and it was a good fit for me. at the time. And I got sober. My life got a whole lot better as I was working the program. I had a sponsor, was working the steps, was going to lots of meetings. And then, around the 6-7 year point, my life really filled up with other things. So I stopped going to as many meetings, stopped being as active, and started playing more video games. And they weren't a problem at first, but the less that I took care of myself as far as the recovery program goes, the more that I seemed to rely on games to deal with stress, to deal with any difficult emotions that were coming up, to like escape from difficult things that were going on in my life. And right from the start, I started to see some of the red flags from my alcoholism showing up with my gaming behavior. And that goes from being obsessive about it, like looking forward to the next time I was going to be able to game, to the amount of time that I was spending on it going up and up, to the point where I was feeling embarrassed about how much time I was spending. So I was actually hiding it from people sometimes, or lying, like if I got together with someone and they asked, how was your afternoon? And I had been gaming for most of the afternoon, I would make up something else. I'd say I was doing something else because I was a little embarrassed about how much time I was spending gaming. So I was definitely seeing some of the red flags. But at this point, this was in 2006, 2007, I had never heard the phrase gaming addiction before. I didn't know it was a thing. I wasn't worried about it. I considered it a substitute behavior, like they talk about in AA. You can pick up these substitute behaviors instead of drinking. And so I just thought it was a substitute that was, passing phase. It was a bad habit, but it wasn't going to be a big deal. When I decided to game less, it would be fine. Because I had other substitutes in my life, other things that temporarily I was obsessed with, but they were just bad habits that were passing phases, and I got over them. But the thing that happened with the gaming was, like my alcoholism, it kept ramping up over time. I kept spending more and more time on it. It kept pushing other things out of my life, to the point where I was really isolating from people most of the time. I was gaming late in the night, not getting anywhere near the sleep that I needed. And I was, my relationships were not doing as well. Things were not going as well at work. I had actually started gaming during work hours, and that is not even something that I had done in my drinking days. I never got drunk at work, but I was gaming during work hours. And a number of times I decided to cut back on my gaming, but like with my alcoholism, the amount of stress that all these problems were causing just made me feel more obsessive and more compulsive about the gaming. So it was definitely a downward spiral, the same way that my drinking had been.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like any addiction, you're feeling the shame of engaging in it. You're feeling stress from the problems that it brings on, and the stress that you're feeling is driving you to even more gaming to escape that. But it makes perfect sense to me. I once talked to a doctor who described addiction as not really being an addiction to a particular substance or behavior, but it's really an addiction to dopamine. It's whatever substance or behavior causes that spike of dopamine in our brain that makes us think that we need more and more of whatever that is, and it just really spins out of control to where it just takes over. That part of our brain is just demanding more and more of that. You mentioned also that reason that you were gaming had to do with this need for escape. I can relate to that with my drinking as well. I just needed to kind of blot out my mind. But I wonder, Scott, if you have noticed since COVID an increase in people seeking help for problem gaming. My thinking being that there's a lot more to escape from nowadays.
Yes, yeah. Definitely within a few months of the COVID lockdown starting, there were a lot more people coming to CGAA meetings, easily twice as many. It might have been 3 times as many. Our membership doubled or tripled during the first year of COVID. There are a number of factors there. I think people who were already on their way down the slope, the downward slope of addiction, the progression of addiction, that the lockdowns might have sped things up.
You got more time at home.
More time at home, more time in front of the computer, more social isolation away from other people, or not going out and being as active physically or mentally or socially as normal. That people were turning to games a lot more, and that probably sped things up for some people. And maybe being locked at home with a spouse or a girlfriend who suddenly saw this problem getting worse than it ever had been might have definitely seemed to inspire some people to come seek help in our meetings.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, oftentimes we're the last ones to want to recognize or admit the problem, but once someone kind of calls us on it and it's out there in the open, it can be a pretty frightening experience. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to seek help. So can you describe what the recovery process is like?
The recovery process is, the way I see it, is the same as for any other addiction. I mean, let's see, I've been involved in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, so I haven't really been involved in other fellowships, but they all have the same feel to me. It's definitely an abstinence-based fellowship, unlike maybe Overeaters Anonymous.
Mm-hmm. I saw that on the website. It's like one of the questions was, do I have to stop? Yeah, it's complete abstinence. That means no gaming.
Right. Yes. So, if we focus on abstinence. It's a mutual support fellowship, where we can do together what we can't do separately. So we rely on talking to each other on the phone frequently and going to meetings as much as we can. It's there's no rules, no set program like with other recovery fellowships. That the idea is to take the suggestions of people who have already achieved the results that you'd like to see for yourself. It's, I don't really see the program being any different than it is in AA.
I was also reading through the website a little bit, and I think in the frequently asked questions section anyway. And, one of the questions was, is this a 12-step fellowship? Do you have to work the 12 steps? And I think the appropriate answer was, it's really up to you. It's not a requirement. And I did read through the 12 steps that are listed on the site, and they are in fact much more secular than what you would find in AA, for example. There's no mention of God at all. You don't see the G word anywhere in those steps.
Yeah. I was a part of the process, the group that came up with the wording of our steps, and inclusivity was one of our top goals. We wanted, this is an international fellowship that mostly meets online. We want Buddhists and Hindus and Taoists and people of all spiritualities, of religions or lack of religion, to feel every bit as welcome as a Christian does in our fellowship. So we tried to keep the steps as much as we could the way that they were, because of people's familiarity with the wording, and the way that they have been for so long. But we found that there were actually quite a few places that we needed to make changes for it to be really inclusive.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. That one thing that I've learned over the years is there are people who have a deep faith and are church going religious people, but they don't necessarily need to have it as part of their recovery either, because they like to keep that part of their life separate.
Yeah, and that's how it has been for me and a lot of other people in CGAA.
So what has your experience been like since you've been involved with CGAA?
I was pretty skeptical about it at first. Like, I remember in AA, I'd heard of online AA meetings, and was, my immediate reaction was like that. There's no way it could be anywhere near as good as face-to-face meetings, because there's just so much magic that seems to happen just being surrounded by other people and seeing their expressions and hearing them talk right next to you, and shaking hands or exchanging hugs or all that stuff. It just seemed like online was just going to be a pale reflection of the actual face-to-face meeting. But if because there were only in the early years that I was going, there were only I'd say between 40 and 100 people in the entire fellowship worldwide. We're pretty well spread out at that time. There was people, hardly anyone could get together face to face with another person in the fellowship. So
I had no idea this was so new. So exactly when did this start?
It's hard to put an exact date on it because there was a forum that was available for any kind of people having any kinds of problems with gaming, whether that's family of compulsive gamers or compulsive gamers themselves. And so people in our fellowship started meeting there early on. But it took until about 2010 before we started having daily online meetings. So I kind of consider that to be the starting point, was when we started having the daily meetings. And because, like I mentioned, the problems we're having with not following certain traditions, that was causing our membership to go through cycles of growth and then collapse, and then growth and then collapse over and over again. So it was only when we really formally organized things ourselves and chose a name, made our own website, and started strictly following the 12 traditions that our size that since then has been steadily growing. So I'd say we're probably around 600 to 700 people right now.
What experiences did you have that solidified in your thinking that you really needed to apply the 12 traditions to this fellowship?
I think our group had experience with breaking almost all of the traditions and got to see firsthand.
That's kind of handy, isn't it? If you want to know if you need a tradition, you should break it, I guess, right?
Because before that point, I'd been in AA for 13 or 14 years at that point, and the traditions felt largely theoretical to me because I had never been a part of any group that was breaking them. Other than the specific, including specific religious language in the meetings, but other than that, groups really firmly stuck to those traditions.
Yeah, they take them pretty seriously in AA.
Yeah. So, so we were not formally organized ourselves. We were relying on this website to meet with each other, and the website was owned by someone who wasn't in our fellowship. And the owner had all sorts of other ideas for what she wanted to happen on her website. So there were news articles on there that were putting controversial ideas on there that really had nothing to do with us. There were rules being handed down on how the website could be used sometimes, which is, we're not, with the traditions, you don't have a hierarchy. You don't have these strict rules. People were being appointed positions of power rather than being elected by conscience. So that was an issue too. And then when we had a couple members doing things that the owner of the website didn't like, she banned them from the website, and that's also
IT
thing.
People could be a problem, and any
yeah. So we had an experience with almost all of the 12 traditions being broken, and got to see what that was like, and it was a major commitment of ours in our early days of around 2014 of really putting the traditions to work.
I can relate to those issues, especially with the website. The whoever manages the website for a fellowship like this, they have so much power because they can just decide, I'm going to put this on, I'm going to put that on, whatever. And, I can see very easily how in the early days that could be a problem. We had the same issues in secular AA. We put up a secular AA website, and the board had sometimes a difficult time controlling what was put on that site. So that's interesting that you adopted those. And what was the process behind that? Did you have a meeting? Was there a vote? How'd that go? How'd that go? And did you have to rewrite any of them?
It was pretty straightforward and didn't take much time. We've been gaining a lot of familiarity with the 12 traditions. I mean, I had a lot of familiarity with them from my time in AA, and so I was talking about them a lot with other people, and people were definitely getting on board with them. So our business meeting group got together and decided, okay, we're going to stick by the traditions. It was a unanimous vote. It wasn't that big a process. When we did handle the wording of writing the traditions to put them on the website, we did reword tradition 2, which in AA says that
A loving God.
Bill Wilson's God is the power over the whole fellowship. But that was a very simple change. We just said that the group conscience is the ultimate authority, because that's how it actually works.
It truly is how
that's how it works in AA and all the fellowships. So we just
every once in a while someone would give a secular AA meeting a hard time because they say there's no way you can be following the traditions because you don't believe in a higher power guiding the group conscience or whatever. But the tradition does say may a higher, I can't remember exact wording, but there is the word may in there. And so for us, no, he just doesn't. The higher power, God has nothing to do with our group conscience. It's just us anyway. But that being said, that is pretty interesting that you had to go through that, just like AA itself when it started out, and they had to create some kind of guidelines to go by based upon their experience, just like what you went through. I do have a question for you that I'm kind of curious about. Just kind of browsing through the website, I noticed that in addition to compulsive computer gaming, another problem that people have is just addiction to screens, to internet use. And I think it's said on the website that people that have this issue are welcome. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of computer gaming? Is that addiction kind of the same, or is it different? And how does all that work together?
Yeah, I believe that internet and technology addiction is a real thing.
Yeah, I do too.
They are separate things. We have, I'd say, a small percentage, I'm not sure, maybe 10%, maybe 20% seem to have an actual addiction to internet and technology. So there is a separate fellowship for that that's called Internet and Technology.
I did not know that. Oh.
Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous, ITAA. And they also exploded during the 2 COVID years.
They
went from having a couple meetings a week to I don't know, 50 meetings a week or something like that.
How
in
interesting.
Several different languages. So we have notes about that on the website to let people who are
okay. I was wondering.
Other fellowship exists for them.
But
it can actually be a pretty tricky thing for our members early on when we first stopped playing video games, is because all of us seem to take that obsessive energy that we used to have towards video games and still be magnetically drawn to the computer or technology and the internet, and can start spending way too much time doing other things on the computer. So it can be very hard to decide during those early months whether or not we're just temporarily using it as a crutch to get over our gaming addiction, or if it's an actual second addiction.
Yeah. And what's so insidious about it is, first of all, we all walk around with our iPhones, whatever, and social media sites like Facebook, they are designed to addict you. They're designed to make us want to look at it every so often. And I find myself sometimes, I took it off my phone for a little while, and I thought, I feel so much better not having this on my phone. Not looking at it all the time. Then all of a sudden I decide, okay, I'm gonna put it back on my phone. And it's really weird how, you'll just kind of like browse through for no reason. I was like, what am I doing?
Yes. Yeah.
So I can definitely see, and I can definitely also see how, because of COVID, this COVID thing is so weird, because it forces, it did me anyway. It forced me to spend more time. I mean, my connection with people was all online. So I'm working from home. Any meetings I go to, AA meetings or something are going to be online. Everyone socializing, everything is right there in front of the computer. And it's just, I don't know, it's just I think it could be so easy just to be drawn into, just to be sucked into, and then not pay attention to your life and what's really important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's been happening for a lot of people lately. I'm sure that's why the number of meetings in ITAA exploded during the past couple of years.
So, how would you describe an addiction to computer gaming? And is there any type of game that is more that seems to be more addictive? Like, would it be games that where you have more interaction with other players, or does that even matter?
Yeah, those things matter for some people. Yeah, there's, I mean, in my mind, I cannot play any type of video game, no matter how simple, you know. And this might not seem obvious at first, and it didn't to me. You know, I thought because I was spending some time playing card games and board games face to face with people after I stopped gaming as a way to play games, and they weren't triggering to me at all. I was having fun doing them, and it just started occurring to me. It was just like, how much difference is there really between playing it on a computer with real people or playing it face to face? And so I did relapse a bunch of times in my first couple of years around this fellowship, and found out there's a very large difference. Like when I played on the computer, it just it just fed energy to the gaming addiction, where I would want more and more. The obsession would grow larger, and I'd be filling more of my time with it. It just seemed to trigger the whole, you know, obsession cycle. And at some point, I would be gaming so much, like, why am I playing this stupid simple card game when I could be playing my game of choice? That is really, you know, what I want. And I would break my my promise to myself not to play that game and end up downloading it again and playing it again. So, I mean, I had trouble with all types of games, but there are games that are far more problematic than others. There are principles that psychologists learned about when they studying gambling, for example, things that really hook people and that cause things that cause gambling addiction. And that information was used to create certain elements of video games to make them more compelling. Yeah, so those features are there. You know, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it has something to do with like randomness. You know, hitting a jackpot in some sort of random way can be highly compelling in the same way that gambling is. So that's one aspect. Definitely the connecting with other people is a big draw for a lot of other people, but also getting to be someone who you're normally not with other people too. Feeling that freedom is a huge draw for a lot of people. Um, and then there's, you know, just these fantasy worlds are a great way to escape real life problems is another issue that really hooks people. And then the sense of accomplishment. So many people feel like they're just spinning their wheels. They're on the rat, you know, they're in the rat cage on the spinning wheel in life, and they're not going anywhere. But in this game, there's like immediate, you know, improvement, or you're leveling up, or you're accomplishing things, and you're improving. That is an enormous draw for a lot of people that can really hook people.
What about the family of gaming addicts? Is there a place for them?
Yeah, there's it just started in January of this year. Well, formally started. There'd been a small group of people being in touch with each other, but yeah, the website for that is called gamer-anon.org, Gamer Anon, and it's been growing pretty quickly with spouses and parents of compulsive gamers. So there's help. There's hope for them too. There's a lot of good experience there that's being shared, especially among those people who are already familiar with the sort of thing from Al-Anon, who are bringing that Al-Anon literature and ideas and principles to the group, and helping out in that way.
Yeah, I imagine that, you know, a family member would get frustrated if they see their loved one, be it a spouse or child or whatever, you know, just hiding away in these games and not participating in the family, and they can't get them to stop. They can't, you know, there's nothing you can do to get an addict to stop, you know. You know, it's good that you have that resource for family members to go and figure out, you know, and just relate with other people that are going through that. I bet it could be heartbreaking, really, if you just kind of lose a loved one. They're there in your house, but you never really get to interact with them or see them, or, you know, they're lost in another world.
Yes, yeah, that's yeah, I've heard the story hundreds of times, so many times where, you know, a, a spouse, right, just hits their end with it, can't take anymore, and gives an ultimatum, just like, you need to choose the video games or me. And to hear that story and to hear that, gaming addicts, well, they must be gaming addicts because they're choosing. They will flat out just say, "I choose the video games. You can leave." It is just unbelievable. But this is one of the things that helped me out early on, was hearing some of these stories from family members, because I was very skeptical that gaming addiction was a real thing, and I didn't want it to be a real thing. I didn't want to have a second addiction.
I know.
But but then hearing these stories, and just hearing how serious it can get, and hearing that the tremendous amounts of denial that people have when confronted about their gaming, and the crazy rationalizations that they'll have, and the extreme anger that comes up when their ability to game is being threatened in any way. Those are all like super clear signs of addiction to me, that help me to see, like, okay, this is the real deal. This is really addiction.
Yeah. Well, the World Health Organization has actually as recognized now computer gaming as a disease, as a problematic behavior. I don't know if you're aware of that. I just happened to do a little bit of Googling before I talked with you, and I saw that. So I found that interesting. So I'm sure there must be studies going on now about this. I never really stopped to think about, how new this is, really relatively new anyway. Over the, I don't know, last 20 years or so, maybe 30 years. I don't know.
Yeah, 20 to 25 years around there.
Yeah. And as technology improves and access to, faster connections and smaller devices that you can use almost anywhere, whatever, I'm sure that it just becomes, easier for people to follow this. But also it's just, these things are designed to hook people, So it's just that's it's almost just like the cigarette industry almost. I mean, those cigarettes were designed to hook people, and so they had a good deal. And I think that the same thing kind of applies with games as well. They're designed to hook people.
Yeah, they're definitely designed that way, and they can affect. A person doesn't have to have the mental disorder of addiction really to be negatively affected by it. Lots of people who are not showing the clear symptoms of addiction can still have lots of problems just from sinking so many tens or dozens of hours per week into these games.
What's the best way if a person? So let's start with this. What signs would you say? I mean, you've already mentioned a few. Spend a lot of time on the game and avoiding other things. How can a person kind of recognize that they're having a problem, and then once they recognize that they do, where can they go for help?
Yeah, how can people recognize that they're having a problem? Well, like I was just saying, there's anybody can have a problem with games that are designed to really draw you in and hook you. So lots of people are having that problem. I think the way for someone to know how serious the problem is and what kind of help they need is to try moderating for a while, or try stopping for a while. Because if someone decides, okay, I'm going to find out how serious this is by stopping for a week, someone who's an addict is going to feel miserable.
You're going to have withdrawal symptoms, aren't you?
Going to have withdrawal symptoms, going to feel really restless and irritable, going to, even if intending to, pour the extra time that you have this week into other projects, we find that we can't, we're just so scattered, our motivation is low, our energy is low. It's just hard to get ourselves to do anything else. We feel impulsive about finding, if not going back to games, and finding some other escape on the computer, watching videos or something like that. And it's just a short matter of time before we're back at the games. And that is a very different experience from lots of people who I've heard from who had problems with games, but they weren't addicted. It was just a bad habit for them. And when they take a break for a week, their experience is entirely different. I've heard so many of them say, I was able to get the sleep that I needed this week. I feel that my energy's better. I was able to accomplish so much more this week than I usually do. Um, yeah, so
That's a huge difference.
that's a huge difference.
Yeah,
And I suspect the same may be true for other types of addictions
absolutely.
that while you're using this potentially addictive behavior, it's hard to tell whether or not you actually have an addiction. But when you try to get it under control or you try to stop for a while, that's when the big
Sure.
differences
That's a
show
good
up.
point. And also, I think that once you begin thinking and questioning about whether or not you have a problem, at that point you should look into it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's a good idea.
it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt to go to a meeting and say, I don't know. I don't know if I have a problem or not. But it's on my mind. I'm thinking I might, you know.
Right. Yeah. Going to a meeting and listening to people's stories and seeing how much you can relate is a good way to see whether or not how severe your problem is, whether or not a support group like CGAA can help. There's also a list of 20 questions, kind of self-test to which are designed really to get lots of yeses from people who are truly addicted, and not as many yeses from people who are not addicted but are having a problem for other reasons. So yeah, taking that test, and that's available on the CGA website, can really help people figure out whether or not they need support. But most people who try to stop will find themselves going back to it within 1 to 3 days. I mean, that's the thing that kept happening to me when I was trying to stop on my own. Was as soon as I hit a day or two of not gaming, I thought, it's not a problem. Clearly, I gamed for an entire day or two. I'm doing really well. Obviously, I was making too big a deal of this. It wouldn't hurt for me to go back to gaming. So it's really, really hard for someone who's truly addicted to even go a week without gaming.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate. I mean, it's just like any other addiction. It's a behavior that is causing negative consequences. And despite those negative consequences, we're just not able to stop. And if we do stop, we begin to have those withdrawal symptoms where we need to engage in that behavior or take that substance to ease those symptoms. And it's a vicious cycle. Then begins to impact your life, your job, your family, everything. It's really an insidious thing, and it just sucks you in. I can just see how it can start off very innocently, and next thing you know, it just spins out of control, pretty quickly. So, is there anything here that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about?
Yes, one topic that feels really important to me, and that we've been touching on some, and it's that through this experience, I'm learning that I have one mental condition that I call an addiction disorder. And an addiction disorder can latch onto more than one type of behavior to try to get, this escape or numbing out or a high or a thrill. And it's become clear to me that almost everybody with an addiction disorder has more than one thing that'll do the trick for them, and I've tried other things and they don't hook me. I gambled. I did a lot of gambling actually for a couple of years, and I am not hooked on gambling.
Isn't that funny? I actually talked to a problem gambler not too long ago, and I had the same experience. There was a period of time I was playing a lot of blackjack and spending a lot of time in the casinos and so forth. But what happened with me is every time I played, I would lose. I mean, bam, 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 every single time. And I kind of got bored with it. But there was a period of time when the highs and lows of the gambling had me. But whatever reason, I got bored with it. And now I have no interest whatsoever in going to a casino. Has no draw for me or appeal to me whatsoever. So it's like I realized, okay, so I guess I wasn't addicted, or maybe I was at one time and then got over. I don't know. But yeah, very interesting. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I do think that you're right, that the problem really isn't necessarily a particular substance, but it's like, you're right. It's like I have this addictive thing in me, and because there's a number of things I can become addicted to, food, and I have gone through different addictions in my life, and it's something. But I've been fortunate anyway, personally, that since I've been sober, usually if a behavior gets problematic, no, I will recognize it before I destroy everything. Anyway,
Yeah.
if that's a positive, I don't know.
Yeah, I've gone through that with a number of behaviors where I really became obsessive and it was starting to cause a problem, but I recognized it and stopped before it was anything like a full-blown addiction. Well, to understand this idea of an addiction disorder clearly, I see it as being similar to obsessive compulsive disorder, where there's only one diagnosis at least in the American manual, the diagnostic manual on disorders for OCD, even though it can manifest in different ways. It can manifest as like checking locks all the time, or washing your hands all the time, or checking on people all the time, or counting everything, or having some sort of ritual. They don't have different diagnoses for all those different manifestations of OCD. And it's clear to me that an addiction disorder should be treated the same way. There should be one diagnosis for it that has all the sort of things that we see in common with all different types of addictions. And the fact that it can manifest with drinking and gambling for some people, or sex and overeating for other people, or video gaming and shopping for someone else. Those manifestations, there shouldn't have to be a separate diagnosis in this manual for each of these different manifestations, when it's obvious that it's all the same sort of condition that different people just play out differently depending on what gives them a high or release from anxiety that they're looking for.
No, I totally agree. It takes me back to what the doctor was telling me. It's what's going on in your brain that's the problem. It's not necessarily the substance. And I've always kind of latched on to that. But I know that addiction is much more complicated than that. I really agree with what you said, though. I think that's true. I really do. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on here. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and to learn more about this. And I'm really glad that we finally were able to touch on this subject on this podcast. It has never come up before since I've been doing this for 6 years now. I just has never, I don't know. And so when you sent me that email, I thought, yes, this is absolutely something we need to talk about. So hopefully this won't be the last time that we talk about it. And I'm going to try to learn more about this, and we'll make sure that when we post the podcast episode, we'll have links to your website, and all the resources and so forth. So thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate your interest in this topic and being able to talk with me.
And that's another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again, SoberLink. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a couple of ways you can do that. Head on over to patreon.com/Beyond Belief Sobriety, and you can become a patron for a small amount of money each month. And with that, you will get a little perk, which we can talk about on the next episode if you would like, or you can just go on over to the site and learn all about it. You can also become a member of our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Beyond Belief Sobriety, and you can become a member there and also receive that little membership perk. If you just want to make a regular one-time contribution and don't really want to do the monthly thing, you can just go over to our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button, or click on the little coffee cup and buy us a cup of coffee. And so thank you again for listening. I really do appreciate it. We'll be back next week with another episode.